Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mohit Kar. Just a brief introduction about myself. I did my master's and I worked on at Virginia Tech and I worked on building multi-leader PFT consensus protocols there. And right now I'm working as a software engineer at Bloomberg. Today I'm going to talk about the paper Stable and Consistent Membership at Scale with a Rapid. This was presented by Suresh et al. At ATC 80. So let's jump into it. So first, a brief sort of overview of what we are talking about. We are talking about a membership service. So what a membership service does is it maintains the ground truth about the cluster, like how many nodes are in the cluster, and every node that subscribes to that service basically gets the current state and it gets some view change callbacks, which it uses to update the state. So there could be some there could be some faulty nodes which are removed from the cluster. So, and then there could be some nodes joining the cluster. So the membership service basically gives you an overview or like it gives you view change callbacks every time an event like this occurs. So you can know like which nodes are actually in the system. So there are two membership service designs, which is one of which is centralized design, where you have a logically centralized service which the nodes in the cluster can access to get the information about the members in the system. So this is relatively simple, but this auxiliary service opens up new fault modes where you can basically lose connection to the membership service intermittently, and you have to you can probably like get inconsistent with other nodes in the system and stuff like that. The other membership service that we have today is called a decentralized service. This is more popular. So a lot of like distributed systems today implement the SWIM protocol for membership. Uh, I mean, although it's so the kind of the things we lose with the decentralized service is it's weakly consistent, and the node can take some, and the nodes in the system can take some time to like basically uh, uh, get the current information of the membership in the system. So the authors discuss the latter of these models by setting up an experiment. So they basically set up a 400 node ECA cluster. So on the x-axis, you can see the time, and on the y-axis, you can see the reported cluster size. So the line that you see on the top is basically the node, like basically the size of the membership list reported by each and every node. So when we are finished bootstrapping this cluster, all of the nodes report that there are 400 nodes in the system. However, at t equals 100, the authors basically introduce 1%. 1% of the processes basically suffer packet loss failure, and this is where everything goes haywire. So all of the nodes, due to the bidirectional nature of the gossip-based membership service, the nodes start to accuse each other of being failed. And at points, even the benign nodes and non-faulty nodes are also removed from the membership list. So this kind of instability is not good, particularly because membership, a lot of failure recovery mechanism and data migration mechanisms rely on the membership service. So these are relatively costly operations, failure recovery and data migration. So if the view is unstable for a long time, this could really this avalanche can really lead to uh, a, a big performance degradation throughout the cluster. Also, if we see at a particular time, different nodes have a different view of the system. So certain nodes might give out different membership list, and other nodes might give out different uh, have a different view of the membership list. This is problematic for applications that are built on top of this membership service, because it's really hard to program around it. Like a lot of almost all distributed applications require a correct view of how many nodes are present in the system. So the authors come up with rapid. The tagline or the summary of which is that it's a stable and consistent membership at scale. So we'll look at each of these keywords separately. So stable. So the service that their service rapid is basically resilient in the presence of which is informally or formally called in literature as gray failures. So there could be some packet losses, network misconfigurations, or network partitions. So they contend that the rapid service is stable regardless of these failures, while other services are just resilient against this nodes crashing. Then they say that their service is consistent. So all of the nodes in the system, the view change callbacks they are getting, they get a consistent sequence of membership changes. So every node would see the same sequence of view change messages. And scale, so they basically say that services today, what they are missing is basically they take a long time to even bootstrap. So they give an example of the Cassandra cluster. So to prevent sort of this a lack of stability and kind of have a work around that, what they do is basically they come up with scenarios where, or they come up with rules where the operators can add only a node at a time and wait 2 minutes in between. So even setting up a small cluster can take hours. So they say that with Rapid they can bootstrap a cluster 2 to 5 times faster than Zookeeper and Memberless. So I forgot to mention one of the things in previous slides. So the centralized design is widely used in Zookeeper-based services, and services like Eka, Memberlist, Surf, basically they use a decentralized design. So let's see how Rapid sort of operates. So initially you have a cluster, and there is a given configuration which is present in all of the nodes. So that configuration is here. So as a node is removed, that configuration is updated. So this update happens via 3 phases. So the Rapid protocol is can be broken down into 3 main procedures. So the first of these procedures is a monitoring overlay that is based on an expander graph. So all of the nodes do not necessarily need to monitor all of the other nodes. Expander graph have certain properties which give the which help us kind of scale the membership service. We'll talk about it in subsequent slides. The next component is a membership change proposal. So membership change proposal, in this stage, we basically get a cut of the nodes that that Rapid is trying to remove from the cluster. I mean, you can also have join and remove alerts, but the authors basically, just for understanding and not overcomplicate the discussion, they just talk. I mean, even I'll talk just about removing the nodes, and we'll discuss more of a decentralized design rather than a centralized. So when I say multi-process cut detection, it's basically a set of nodes are removed from the cluster, and the nodes basically generate a cut of the new nodes present in the system. So multi-process cut detection basically gives almost everywhere agreement with high probability that we'll see in subsequent slides, which they finalize by using a consensus protocol to achieve everywhere agreement. So the first 2 parts basically help in providing stability, and the last 2 parts help in providing consistency. So let's jump into the expander graph based monitoring, how the nodes are set up, how the monitoring topology is set up in the system. So expander graph is basically defined as a graph which has a low degree and a high connectivity. So informally, we can sort of guess that what the authors want is that there are not too many uh, uh, monitoring alerts generated in the system, but since the graph has high connectivity, we should be able to detect almost all of the alerts. So the authors basically set up a K ring, a K pseudo random ring, which they contend forms a very good expander graph if K is greater than or equal to 3. So basically the ring contains all the members, and they build sort of this monitoring overlay by uh, following this rule. Basically the preceding nodes, so for example in ring 0 the preceding node would be V. It observes the subsequent node in a clockwise order. So basically V would observe P and P would observe R in ring 0, and same for all of the other rings. So basically that gives us this sort of uh, uh, so basically this gives us this diagram where W, V, X, U are observing P, and P is in turn observing SR, S, or like SR, TW or TY. So uh, kind of delving deeper into this topology, basically every node in the system, which is called a subject, has K observers. So this is true for every node in the system. The nice fact about K is that the K can be very small. Like, so it could be just 10 observers are observing any given node in a 1,000 node cluster. So that's really good. All of the nodes don't need to monitor each other. And uh, and any new node that comes in basically need to set up only 2K connections. So that is pretty good as well. So some of the important features about this sort of setup is basically that this is a directed graph. So only the observers uh, observe the subject. This is not a bidirectional graph. So, I mean, even though subject can also be observing observers, but that is a different sort of edge. That is a different edge. So the another interesting fact is that Rapid gives us the capability to add our own edge failure detectors. So those failure detectors can be like as simple as heartbeat uh, uh, failure detectors, where they just detect crash faults, or they can detect network packet losses, which is one of the gray failures, or they can even go as far as monitoring application state. So they can interface with the application logic. For example, if there are some problems with how a packet is transmitted, they can check like, okay, what's the hash code? What's the expected hash code? So what that hash code I'm getting, so they can basically even plug into that to detect failures. So, and another fact about the graph-based monitoring is whatever alerts are generated are basically irrevocable. So once the alert is generated, there is no going back. So for each subject, there could be up to K alerts that are generated. So all of these K alerts are broadcasted by the observers if they detect any changes. So that basically feeds into the next component of Rapid, which is a membership change proposal. So in this, we'll see like how the alerts that are generated are used to convert into a multi-process cut. So let's consider this given cluster where the horizontal lines, the first three columns, basically uh, observe the rightmost column. So somewhat of this kind of setup. So when a fault is detected, uh, all of these nodes will, all of the nodes, all of the horizontal nodes on the left will basically generate alerts. So every process in the system, so this this is done at every node in the system, basically counts or tallies up the alerts that it receives for each subject. So let's say there is we saw this subject in the previous slide, so there could be red or green subject, and we keep on getting alerts for this. So every process in the system basically keeps a tally of how many alerts it has received. So if the alerts basically uh, uh, basically go above the high water mark, the report generated for that particular subject is deemed to be stable. However, if the alerts lie between L and H, which is L is the low watermark, these reports are basically deemed unstable. So so the reports for the reports for, if a report for a subject is stable, then that is a candidate for removal. However, we wait on outputting the new configuration until there exist no processes for which the reports are unstable. So while we are waiting, there could be cases where we never receive enough reports for a given subject to make a stable report for it. So one of the cases in which this can happen is basically the observers for a given subject are themselves faulty. So for example, I mean, the arrow from red should actually go to yellow. So in this case, like, we will never receive enough reports for yellow to make a stable report. So in these cases, we can, if we check that the observers for a particular node are also in the set, we basically deem that to be an implicit detection. So we basically add up the number of observers failed to the tally for yellow. So in this way, the tally would go beyond the high watermark, and we can basically generate a cut from it. So after this stage, every node basically has a cut. So so at this point, so the values of L and H are chosen in a way that the conflict is minimum. So most of the nodes in the system output the same cut. So that basically gives us an almost everywhere agreement. The authors have done an empirical study on it, which we'll see the result for that in the evaluation section. And they also prove that with H and L, with particular values of H and L, we would be able to get an almost everywhere agreement with high probability. So we can, if you are more interested in that, you can read the technical report on it. So this almost everywhere agreement is basically converted to an everywhere agreement using a multi-leader consensus protocol. So all of these nodes in the system output their cuts as a proposal to the consensus stage. So if there are enough votes for a particular proposal, so all of these cuts are basically sent to other processes using a gossip-based counting protocol. So the number of votes are counted for each of the cut. And if the number of votes go beyond 3/4 of the total cluster size, then we basically decide that cut. So that's a complete overview of how Rapid operates. So let's look a bit into the evaluation. So the first evaluation that the authors do with Rapid is by setting up 1,000 node cluster. So they vary the cluster size as well. So at the minimum stage with 1,000 node cluster, the bootstrap timings are almost the same. But as we kind of increase the cluster size, the zookeeper becomes non-viable. It takes too long to basically set up a cluster. However, as we can see, the Rapid scales scales better than Zookeeper. So it almost, it's easier to bootstrap a cluster. We can do it 2 to 5 times Zookeeper. So in the next slide, they basically introduce HiPacket loss in 1% of the processes. So both of Zookeeper and member list are not able to stabilize the membership view, and uh, uh, they are not able to guarantee anything in case of gray failure like HiPacket loss. However, Rapid is able to quickly give a stable view across all of the nodes. So we can see that 990 nodes are detected by Rapid almost immediately. Also, they talk about one-way network partitions. So Zookeeper is not able to even detect the one-way network partition because so the way they generate a one-way network partition is basically they introduce HiPacket loss in ingress messages for the nodes. However, Zookeeper is just reliant on heartbeats going out of the nodes. So Zookeeper is not able to detect any failure. The member list is able to detect those failures. However, it's not able to stabilize the views. However, Rapid shines here in this case as well. So lastly, they give an empirical analysis on high H and low values. So the K equals 10, and they vary the number of failures and see the conflict rate that they get. So they basically realize that if there is a if H minus L is larger, they basically get lower number of conflicts for even high number of faults. So that is because all of the nodes are actually waiting before generating a configuration. So the H and L values are something that you can play with, and they give you robustness across a wide range of H and L values. So H minus L will basically, there could be a breaking point where H minus L is enough that you don't have to wait for a longer period of time. But if you wait enough, then you will basically be able to have zero conflicts. So with that, I'd like to end the presentation of this paper, and now we can start discussing. Yep, that's it.
Cool, awesome presentation. Thank you so much. Okay.